I need to tell you something. I like to call myself a survival horror fan, but I think I use that label a bit loosely. Off the top of my head, I've really only played Resident Evil and Dead Space, but that's about as far as I've dipped my toes into the genre. So I figured I'd try something new and played the Silent Hill 2 remake for the first time. And after a few playthroughs, I cannot stress enough how much of a masterpiece this game truly is. Now, I've known about the Silent Hill franchise for a while and knew it was meant to be scary, but this is easily the most terrifying, nerve-wracking game I've ever played. And I don't think any level in a game has terrified me more than Toluca Prison. I'm sure if you've played SH2 and stopped by to hear me ramble about it, you know how scary this game can really get. There's this constant anxiety throughout the game, and the environments are rich with their own terror and storytelling that really engrosses you in the world of Silent Hill. It's this suffocating dread that lingers all the way through, and I think this is what makes SH2's brand of horror so memorable. But after a few hours of playing, I kind of found myself getting comfortable with the kind of horror the game uses to scare you. So you best believe that when I went down that super creepy staircase in the town's historical society leading to the prison, I still kind of thought I was being set up for the usual shenanigans that the game had in store. I could not have been more wrong. I have never been as terrorized in any video game, let alone my everyday life, until going through this hellscape for the first time. But as horrifying as this place is, I think it's easily the best level in this game. Toluca Prison is by far the scariest place in all of Silent Hill 2. From its towering cell blocks to its eerie atmosphere, this part of the game doesn't hold back, and I'm so glad it doesn't. So, let me tell you exactly why this place is so goddamn terrifying and easily the most horrifying place in Silent Hill 2. I'm sure if you're watching, you're at least familiar with some of the earlier levels of SH2 leading up to Toluca. Credit where it's due, those levels are phenomenal as well. I really like the first few hours exploring the town and the apartment complexes just a little later on. Easily some of the most memorable environments on their own and a really great intro for the game. After playing a few times, I noticed there's a bit of a pattern to how Silent Hill 2 sets you up for each of its new levels. Normally, you find the area's main puzzle, meet whatever monster lurks down the hall, and maybe scrounge up a new weapon to feel like an unmatched badass for a few minutes. And on the surface, Toluca Prison sets you up for this already established formula. We're introduced to the prison with this absurdly long staircase going straight into the Earth's core and then into a moldy intake room. There's some interesting decor, but nothing too out of line. At least considering the absurd shit we've already seen. There's a few enemies here and there, but nothing crazy yet. Diving further into the abyss, we're placed into a dimly lit cafeteria that serves as the formal entrance to Toluca Prison. Eddie, one of the few people also in Silent Hill, is here too. But he's completely off his rocker by this point, so we kinda just let him do his thing. So far, nothing really out of the ordinary, at least by Silent Hill standards. But take a few steps out of the cafeteria and you'll find the prison's armory, with the chapel not too far from there. The most noticeable thing about the prison so far is that it's a much wider indoor space than usual. Most of the game has kind of crammed you into tiny rooms and narrow hallways to this point. I mean, there's a fair number of indoor spaces in earlier levels, so this really isn't a new concept to this point. But on first entering the prison, it's a subtle change from how most other places introduce themselves. The claustrophobic environments are a standout feature of SH2, so seeing these large, open spaces makes this environment stand out on first impressions. After that little change in scenery, we're back to the usual. We see a less than shiny new rifle locked inside a cabinet that would be a hell of a lot more useful outside of it. There's some notes here that give a little backstory to the prison, much like other levels. Still, nothing we really haven't seen before. But go a bit further and you'll find yourself in the cell blocks of the prison. At least, that's what it's supposed to be once you hit the fancy new light switches in here. When I tell you that hitting the lights was when I realized how depraved and soul-crushing this place was going to be, I mean that with absolutely zero exaggeration. Trust me, I work in corporate America. Turning on the lights reveals the newest horror. A mannequin stands in the middle of the cell block and writhes violently as the lights come on. And in sync with my horror just looking at this bastard, it starts to crawl up the walls of the cell block that extends into the upper atmosphere. It's at this moment that I see the true scope of what Toluca Prison is about to throw at me. There's a new monster that I know is gonna absolutely rock my shit, and now I have to look up just to see this damn thing. And this is where the initial fear of Toluca Prison really comes from. Realizing that enemies will utilize this space completely terrified me. The wide open rooms from earlier were really an omen for things to come. The walls are tall for a reason, and that reason is to crush your confidence as you enter Toluca. Right off the bat, your expectations of entering a new environment are completely shattered. Any sense of security of knowing how Silent Hill 2 introduces new levels is completely taken away, and Toluca really shows you how unprepared you are for its horrors. These few seconds are easily some of the most horrifying I've ever had in a video game. This singular moment revolutionizes the terror of the game, just as you're ready to keep pushing through its already superb horror. Now that I've given you an idea of what's to come, I kinda wanna take a step back and nerd out about how Silent Hill 2 creates its horror. Oppressive dread is the best way to describe it. Every room and hallway has you on edge, like something's lurking at every turn. It has this way of making you feel perpetually unsafe. No matter how many times you play it, it never really goes away. Any of you who've played this game will know there's a bit of a recipe to how it induces panic and anxiety. You're constantly navigating dark hallways and rooms, with your flashlight illuminating only what's in front of you. There's always some grotesque or unsettling feature to each of the levels that reveals the morbid past of these locations. The soundscape and ambience of each level is unsettling, adding to the discomforting tone of the game. Monsters creep in the darkness and take advantage of it to surprise you if you're not careful. The mannequin is easily the biggest offender. This bastard has probably taken years off my life. All of these create this suffocating, ever-present discomfort throughout the game. No place is truly safe, aside from the literal save points. That's what I mean by oppressive dread. This unshakable tension creates the perfect atmosphere for the game from start to finish. SH2 gives you no room to breathe with its brand of horror. To never feel completely safe wherever you go makes for some of the best video game horror, which is what I love about this game's vibe. Going back to Toluca Prison, you would expect it to follow the same formula to carry on that tone. And while it does for the most part, the prison tweaks a few things. With just a few subtle changes to the formula, the prison is able to absolutely blindside you in ways that will leave you nothing short of traumatized. Toluca Prison inverts specific parts of SH2's horror. It keeps most of the same stuff, like its ambience and tight spaces, to keep that already established tone of the game. But Toluca changes just enough of the horror formula to keep you on your toes, which is much needed by this point in the game at roughly 10 hours in. We can find a lot of these tweaks in that intro to the new mannequin I mentioned earlier. Where there were narrow hallways and cramped dark rooms, there's now huge cell blocks with light switches that can illuminate the area for a few seconds. Normally, more space and lighting would make a horror game feel maybe a little less scary, but this is definitely not the case here. Hitting the lights shows the layout of this new environment, and then the monster immediately shows you how it's going to be used against you. The first few seconds of entering the cell block put everything you've been acclimated to into question. From a gameplay perspective, you as the player are introduced to new sorts of challenges as you explore Toluca. The lights give you a brief glimpse of your surroundings, much more than what the flashlight has been able to so far. The monster can climb up the walls, adding another dimension to combat and exploration. These new pressures are great for stressing you the hell out, adding to the terror of this whole place. The prison immediately forces you to play by a new set of rules and hurls you into the deep end to figure them out. Having to acclimate to these new challenges is where a lot of Toluca's horror is derived from. We're not in our usual cramped environments, at least for now. Silent Hill's rules for entering new environments are completely thrown out the window. The environment itself is also presented a little differently from what we've played through so far. As empty as the town is, earlier locations still have a little bit of humanity to them. There's this lived-in vibe that gives each place at least a little bit of charm, whether it's warmer lighting or even just some decorative tiles and wallpaper. There's also a lingering theme of rot and decay in these places that screams Silent Hill. Certain sections of the apartments and the hospital have their own grotesque, disgusting touches. The prison goes for something different. It feels kind of desolate here. There's the usual rot and decay of earlier levels, but not much of that liveliness here. This being a prison, it's not at all welcoming. There's a very liberal use of concrete and steel that extinguishes any sort of life here. A lot of it is molded and rusted, so we're not too far from the norm here. White fluorescent lights give much of the prison a bluish hue. The prison's infirmary is a great example of this. The white lighting, on top of the plain steel and concrete, gives a sort of cold atmosphere to the prison. Compare that to the warmer, lived-in vibe of the hospital and apartment complexes, and you'll notice the prison's very stark contrast. The chapel might be the only place with any sort of cozy atmosphere to it, but it's really not much at all. There's some amber-colored lights that give the room an artificially warm tone. Aside from that, the chapel is still a pretty uninviting place. Just look at these confessionals. I don't think anybody would really want to stick around after seeing this shit. This place is entirely designed with function over form in mind, with no hint of humanity in its creation. Unless you really like prison bunks, there's really nothing else here but the concrete walls and steel bars. It gives kind of a lifeless vibe to the prison. I mean, there's literally a corpse in the cafeteria. I think that sums up my point pretty damn well. What I'm trying to get at here is that the game is beginning to subvert your expectations by this point. You're used to what the game throws at you by now, so there's a need for change. Going down the staircase in the Historical Society and exploring the smaller corridors just after that are a little reminiscent of earlier environments. Then once you're really in the prison, the game starts to shake things up. You're given this false sense of security that's quickly stripped away once you start exploring further. The prison feels like a totally different environment from what we're used to and taps into that fear of the unknown to keep you on edge as you explore. It revitalizes that early game horror and recaptures that feeling of weakness upon first stepping into Silent Hill. I think being able to subvert your expectations, both in gameplay and environmental design, is where the fear and dread of Toluca really comes from. Without this subversion, I think this would just become a forgettable nothing burger of a level. I think a great example of this new vibe from the prison can be found just beyond the cell blocks, in the yard. On first glance, you'll see it's pretty empty. I use the word empty very loosely here. There's absolutely nothing to see in this pitch black darkness. It's also eerily quiet when first stepping out here. The prison's main puzzle is found out here as well, with the gallows just behind it. But aside from that, there's really nothing else here. Also kind of fitting that the gallows are the only other structure out here besides the puzzle. Really adds to that lifeless vibe here. We can hear the footsteps of something stalking us in the dark. After meeting the hellspawn of the cell blocks, you can't help but feel that the new monster is about to begin its campaign of terror out here. Thankfully, whatever's out here doesn't approach, but it's still creepy as hell. The yard has a lot of the features that make Toluca so unique. It's empty and expansive, and it has a way of making you feel so exposed for the few minutes you're out here. It's able to tap into the usual fear of the unknown that's commonly used in horror. That dreadful uncertainty in the yard is a great sample of the prison's vibe as a whole. I really can't stress enough how uncomfortable this place made me. I'd seen some crazy shit to this point in the game, but the yard is by far among the worst places I've had to explore. Fortunately, you can't stay here, as there's a puzzle to be solved. Unfortunately, that means you need to go back inside the prison to solve it. The prison, with the scary-ass crawling mannequins all over the place. This is where shit gets absolutely wicked. I've already gone over how scary it was just to look at this thing, but I don't think that short little sequence does it justice. This thing is horrifying. I'm sure I've developed some sort of chronic heart condition after being scared by this thing so many damn times. It's bad enough I have to look for the regular mannequins everywhere, but to let this shithead stick to the walls sent me over the edge. It runs so damn fast, it makes the most disgusting little noises before hurling itself at you from the ceiling. There's always more than one, and they crawl along the prison bars to harass you if they can't reach you. And worst of all, this thing can open the fucking doors. I have never been so emotionally terrorized by digital entertainment until meeting this damn thing. This is by far the scariest monster I've ever met in a video game. The way it can use the environment to hunt you makes it such a standout enemy in this game. Toluca has so much verticality that you can't go more than a few feet without at least looking up to check for them. And if you do get close to this thing, be prepared to hear some of the most unsettling enemy ambience in the game. Like seriously, this is just flat out disturbing. That rifle I mentioned earlier makes roaming around the prison a little bit easier. If you're surgical like me, it's a real game changer. Toluca Prison is the perfect place to introduce this new monster. The verticality of the area is weaponized against you so much as you explore. The monsters we've encountered to this point are pretty easy to deal with by the time we reach Toluca, but like the prison's been doing from the start, it introduces a change that catches you completely off guard and gives you very little time to prepare. The crawling mannequin is also a persistent enemy for the rest of the game. I was further terrorized by this asshole for the next 10-ish hours of my run. Every environment after the prison introduces at least some sort of verticality that the monster takes full advantage of, so get used to it. Toluca Prison is already terrifying as is, but this monster ups the ante so much that I think it seals the prison as the scariest place in the game. I've yapped long enough about how scary Toluca Prison can be, so I'll round out my little nerd rant with some other things I liked. The bulk of the horror is easily captured in the first few minutes, but there's some honorable mentions sprinkled about. As I've harped on for long enough, the prison diverts course from the kinds of horror we've seen in earlier levels. It uses a more direct, in-your-face kind of horror through a few intense combat encounters. There's the execution room lockdown where tons of enemies swarm you as you try to escape. There's also the showers, and this spot uses a lot of that wide open space that Toluca is known for. The pressure of these encounters amps up the combat from the slow, methodical crawls we're used to. There's the scream you can hear just before leaving the bathroom in the prison's infirmary. Definitely got me the first time around. There's also the creepy-ass voice down in the basement. I really can't tell what it's saying, but I don't think I want to ask, so I just let it do its thing while I get the hell out of here. All of this overt horror reimagines that oppressive dread I talked about earlier. That fear that the game utilizes so well is recontextualized through these changes and creates a far more terrifying dread compared to other places. The slow burn horror of earlier levels is replaced with a more disturbing and sinister terror. The soundscape is also fantastic. It really captures that desolate, empty feeling the whole prison has. Things like rattling bars or slamming cell doors really add to the unshakable suspense you get from exploring Toluca. I really like the vibe of the yard, especially with the creepy footsteps of whatever's out there. Maybe not so much in the moment, but, in hindsight. Even the light switches in the cell blocks have a little terror to them. That pressure of having only a few seconds before it gets dark again is so terrifying, and I love that it's a staple of this level. I like how the game can turn light, something that's supposed to help you navigate the world of SH2, into something that now kind of works against you. Add in those crawling mannequins that hunt you down as you sprint through this shithole, and the horrific irony of these lights reveals itself. It's a nice little switch from what you're used to. I know I kind of rattled these things off, but I figured I'd still mention these other parts of Toluca. There were just a few extra things that I thought added to the horror of the place. Toluca Prison is by far the scariest place in all of Silent Hill 2. I don't think any place before it really matches its energy. You aren't really ready for the shakeup of the usual horror formula that older levels used. The place is tall and imposing and includes some memorable scares to mix things up. The atmosphere of the prison stands out so much from previous environments. It feels like the first step into this more sinister horror the game sets up for in the second half, marking a shift in its themes and terror. Subverting your expectations revitalizes that early game horror of first stepping into Silent Hill. It was so refreshing to see that the oppressive dread the game relies on is cranked up by several orders of magnitude this late into the story. The new monster alone could seriously make the case for why Toluca is the scariest place. This thing's psychological torture is unmatched and sticks with you as you dive further into the abyss. I really can't stop gushing over how good this game is. Easily among the best horror games I've played, and exploring Toluca Prison is such a memorable part of it. So, to sum it up, fuck this place, fuck that guy, and I will be back when I eventually get bored and play Silent Hill 2 again. Before I let you go, I just want to hop on and say that if you made it this far, straight up genuine thanks for watching. I spent probably a little too much time making this whole video, so if you really stuck around to hear my mad rambling, I really appreciate it. I saved the usual YouTube panhandling for the very end because I'm sure you hear that enough already and know the drill. If you enjoyed, consider leaving a like. If you really want to stick around and hear some other nonsense from me, go ahead and subscribe too. Any and all support is greatly appreciated. I really want to do more of these kind of analytical videos, so if you have any ideas or feedback, just feel free to leave them in the comments. Now, I don't want to spoil too much or make any empty promises, but trust that I've got some ideas for future stuff. I just need some time to flesh them out and put together something that I'm actually happy with. I'm not really sure when I'll upload again. That kind of depends on how much time I've got between my regular boring-ass day job and this YouTube thing. But I'll be back eventually. Anyway, seriously, thanks again for watching. And until I have something else to tell you, take care, and I'll see you later.